She was young once, girl of the bohemian kind. In the cold, bright dawn, we watched her grow. Wisdom begun, season when the river was high. On the gray stone lawn, I walked alone. Me and my heart, following the shadow she made. Like a dull sky day, I chased the sun. Back at the start, I was still in love with the way. It's a long way from what's become. The colors we wore, see the all-new girl, rehearsed and well, filling my cup, laying at the edge of the shore. See the way she moves, I broke the spell. Trouble man, you wished it all away. Gun in hand, you found a path today. And I know nothing about trouble man. Your faith was long ago. Foreign land, the sea was made of stone. And I know nothing about. He's gotten bad for me. He's gotten bad for me. The only game he played, turn the light away. He's gotten bad for me. He's gotten bad for me. The only game he played. Trouble man, we used to shake the dead. Ship unmanned, the rain was just ahead. And I know nothing about where trouble man is just the empty name. Try to fix it before you break it, then it's gone. Oh no, you go home, we go home.